If I want to stir the pot anymore, hey, belt drive, 100k, Rachel Atherton, winningest female ever, get her on the starting blocks and then poof, she's gone.
All right, folks, this week we're joined by Norco Race Division team manager and coach of the stars, Alan Milway, where we'll be dissecting all the team moves for the 2025 Downhill World Cup. We'll also be asking all important questions such as, will we see Rachel Atherton winning a World Cup on a belt-driven bike this year? As always, don't forget to support the channel, hit the like button down there, don't forget to subscribe. That's it from me. Let's get on with the show. Alan Milway, welcome to the Downtime Podcast studio, mate. First guest to christen it.
I'm honoured. It's a fantastic spot you got here. I'm chuffed to be here. Nice to see you.
Thanks, mate. How's the coffee? That's the most important bit to me.
Coffee's always good. I'm always impressed when I come around here. Good coffee machine, good coffee barista.
Nice one. Right, we are here to talk about the 2025 Downhill World Cup season, and I think it's the biggest change I've ever seen or that I can remember, like in the sport. It's a lot of team moves, it's a lot of new teams, it's a lot of teams moving away. We've got quite a change to the rules, the point systems, like the setup of the event. Huge amounts of stuff going on. Before we start, just give us your take on the way that things have changed from a rules perspective. What are teams going through over this off season, trying to make sure they can be part of 2025? Because I think it's been confusing for many, including maybe some of the teams initially, to work out what was going on. Yeah,
it's been a real shake-up, to be honest. We heard from the initial sort of rumours to the initial document that was sort of sent to the managers, and then that was leaked. All of this stuff starts to come through the year, and we're having a lot of internal meetings as Norco going, right, what do we need to do? You know, what do we need to do to fit within this criteria? And for us, we had a plan. Greg had this long-term vision that was going one direction, and we wanted to maybe build from the ground up and have a longer-term development of everything. And then the rules come in and you're like, oh, actually, is this going to work within what we need it to work with? So we've tried to make sure that we can bring on the riders we want to bring on, not just go, hey, they've got the points, because that's been one of the things going around. It's like, if you're a rider out of contract or you've had a really good year, then you're probably thinking, well, I've got to make the most of this. But from a team's point of view, we want something that's going to be long lasting and productive for everyone. But with these rule changes and with the word of you need a certain number of points and the riders bring the points, and how do they calculate the points? Because a lot of the managers were discussing this, and a couple of the managers are really clued up on it, but then the system came back as though maybe it was actually going to be different. It's been really confusing. I think I've just got to hope, and I'm an optimist, that the people making these decisions, they're more intelligent than me about this. They know this side of the sport, that it's for the best of the sport to produce the best product. And ultimately we are producing a product.
Yeah.
And I think as long as we don't, cut ourselves off at the knees and understand that we still need grassroots and we still need development. Yeah. We can talk about the Continental series, and I think that could really fit well. It's been a crazy time, and we were in talks with riders from midsummer, and I think the biggest shake-up for everyone was I went from race day at Mont-Saint-Anne to the next morning. Me and Greg were in a huge meeting with all the bigwigs and discussing this year. And normally we sort of feel as though we can fly over, mess about for a little bit, and then start again. But it's been full on. Yeah.
Well, that's good though, right? Change is good sometimes, and it's going to shake things up. And I think there's already some exciting things coming out of it, which is really good to see. Let's just say we're recording this the day after the team submissions to the UCI, which was the 15th of January. But the episode will be going out a few days later. So we're correct, we believe, as of today. Not all teams have announced rosters. And we clearly, obviously, for another 3 weeks, we won't know which of the top 15 teams that make the automatic cut and which are the 5 wildcard teams that get to come along to all the World Cups. So things may change, but we'll do our best. Anything we don't know is based on the best, most substantiated rumours we can find. There's plenty of good sources on the internet for those, and I'm sure quite a lot of listeners will have been dipping in and out of various forums and keeping an eye on stuff. But yeah, we'll do our best to be factually correct, and we'll start off with teams that we do know what's going on and rosters that have been announced. I mean, it makes sense to start with Norco. You're the team manager for that squad, and you know, one season in now, and I think it's fair to say it was a fairly rough, challenging season for you. Like, it didn't go particularly smoothly with injuries and ups and downs. Like, it was definitely a learning year, and I guess that put you on the back foot as far as points, because you know not everyone performed where you would normally expect them to, and you had riders that were out for pretty much the whole season. Talk us through that off season from your perspective and the squad that you've got in front of you, because it's grown. You've got some really exciting names on there, and I think it's one of the biggest pieces of team news and one of the more exciting teams for us to watch for 25. Yeah,
it's like you say, this year started tricky. It was a hard year, and I think I was quoted as saying it was a bit of a baptism of fire. And then the Norco documentary at the end of the year was titled Baptism of Fire, so I think that everyone agreed. But we've come out of it really well. Like, to think how much we've done, to see Greg on the podium, to see Gracie on the podium, you know, the 4th place at Worlds as well for her, that's been brilliant. And I think we were looking at this year as a building year, and what we were able to do with Kirk is brilliant. And then looking forward, personally, it's been a really exciting development from my point of view to be involved in sort of team selection and be discussing this with Greg and having our opinions and discussing it with, there was someone at Norco, and then myself and Greg, and we were the ones who were discussing where we thought the team should be and what we thought the direction to go in. Okay. And, I think starting out the core of it is like, we want to keep building Gracie and work behind Gracie. So anything we did, we wanted it to be complementary to that. Okay. We didn't want to feel as though we were bringing someone in that they weren't going to gel or work well together. And having got to know Gracie really well this year, she's amazing to work with. But I think what will work for her and what might not. So, those discussions were certainly a big part of it. And I've always been a fan of Eris. I think, again, you might have asked me this time last year in terms of like riders I enjoy watching, and in terms of when I'm on track for the juniors, like Eris is super exciting to watch. So
incredible.
I started to talk to her over the course of the season, and to get her on board's brilliant. Very, very intelligent girl, young girl, very driven and motivated, knows a lot about her bike and what she wants from it. And she had some amazing feedback on the bike early on when she tested it. So that was really cool. Yeah. And her and Gracie get on well, and they're already talking about riding together, and they're going to ride hardline together and stuff like that. So that's going to be great. And then the other female that we brought on is a junior, Lena, and I've coached Lena for the past couple of years. So that, to me, is really exciting, because I could see her potential really early, and to feel like I can keep sort of nurturing that and working with her. That's going to be cool. Yeah. And I think if you talk about those 3 girls as a whip train in the B practice, that's going to be a pretty healthy, there's going to be some style on show there. Yeah. I think, from my point of view, that's brilliant. And I think we had them over pre-Christmas, so we had a big Norco training camp, and those 3 got on really well. Nice. So
that makes a big difference, right, in the team dynamic.
Really important. Yeah. I think it can be very much overlooked, because ultimately we want to be a team. We don't want to be a collection of individuals who turn up and see each other and each do our thing. I think you're always better as a collective, and you get the most out of everyone. So that was key. Yeah. And then Bodie coming over from Trek to us, like, he's someone who's really exciting rider, got plenty of speed, Canadian, someone that the brand can really get behind as well from a Canadian point of view. Yeah. And he's just a lovely guy as well. So again, to have him come over, I'm really excited by. Nice. And then Mr. Danny James Hart, who I've got a long-standing history with. Yeah.
I think that was the biggest surprise for me anyway. Like, I'd never thought I'd see that squad with Danny in it. I don't know why. I can't quite work it out. I guess it's because Danny and Greg have competed together for so long. Like, putting those 2 together in a relationship where they're working together, to me, feels like unusual, but you obviously have a lot of faith. I mean, you've known Danny and worked with Danny for many years, right?
Yeah. Well, since he was 15. So what I was reflecting on the other day was I met Danny when he was Lena's age.
Okay.
So if you think about that and how we can sort of move forward from there, I'm excited for what's to come for Lena. You know, we've got this, 15 years potentially. But Greg's different because Greg's no longer a racer, and he's so smart. I think I've learned working with Greg so closely over the past couple of years that he knows what he's talking about. And I know that's obvious. Obviously, he knows what he's talking about, but he has these insights and these sorts of, I think we should go down this direction. I think this will work.
Yeah.
And you sort of trust in that. And if he was pushing back on the Danny move, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
I think we were all together in like how it could work. And I think Danny's somewhat like maybe misrepresented. I think sometimes people can think that he's in his own little silo or wants to be in his own little silo. And I think Greg potentially had that same, vibe to him, that he maybe wasn't the best teammate for some people.
Yeah.
But these guys are competitive and they want the best, and they want everyone like aligned with them on the front. We're at the front of the battle and we're off together.
Yeah.
And I think that at Norco, Danny is able to feel like we're all right there with him, right? This is what we're going to do together. And he's not competing with Greg. Greg's there almost like as a mentor. And I think Danny's good with that. Danny's good with someone to be clear with him.
Yeah.
And then he can decide whether do I agree with that or do I not agree with it? If someone's quite woolly and not really like putting an opinion out there, I think, you're like, well, what are you saying to me? So I've certainly learned in my communication to try and be, this is the route I'd like to go down, and then you can have a debate on whether it's the right thing to do or not. But to have Danny on the bike is brilliant, and he's such a worker. Like, he just wants to, and I think he feels a responsibility now to be like, right, I've got this opportunity with this team, and we're on the early stages of Norco's growth.
Yeah,
and he wants to spearhead it, and he can be the veteran. He can be the guy. I said to him, "You've got to be a good teammate. You've got to be a good teammate. You're the guy they're looking at now." So he's definitely taken that on. It's been brilliant.
That's cool. I was going to ask how you see Danny's role in the team, because it feels like Danny's been around forever and he's been very, very successful forever. And he's definitely had some rougher times over the last few years, but we saw what he could do yet again this year after pulling together a pretty last minute deal, still getting incredible results. Is Danny there to win races for you, or is Danny there to like help the younger riders, to be part of that like coaching structure with Greg? Is it a bit of both? Personally, I hope it's the former. I hope he's there to win races.
He's just there to win races.
Okay.
But I think that by osmosis, if you're around Danny Hart and you're with him and you're seeing what he does, keep up. And that's going to be great.
Yeah.
Because Lucas is there. He's, the poor guy's had, he's had a rough go of injuries, and we see his potential and we want him to realize that potential.
Yeah.
And this is the opportunity for Lucas to be with Bodie. They're not, too far apart geographically at home, and they can ride together, and then to learn from Danny. They're both very young. So really to have those two young guns and someone with Danny's experience, I think is going to work well.
Yeah.
And the good thing is they're not characters that are going to need babysitting either. That's, they're like, someone joked to me that Bodie was the most mature 19-year-old they've ever seen, sort of thing. He's a young lad, and for him to sort of be a mature, sensible, clued up guy with how he wants his bike and how he's working in his training. He's very astute with his training. So they all push each other. And again, to have them, I was quite clear how I wanted to structure the training camp in December, and part of it was to put those three together and say, well, how's it going to shake out? Because they're all different people, and it was brilliant. So it's going to be good.
Yeah, excited for it.
Yeah.
Nice one. Right, let's move on to Santa Cruz Syndicate, because it's a team that we're used to seeing at the top of the sheets, and not the easiest of years for them. Jackson Goldson absent for all of last season, and he's back. That's got to be a good thing for downhill racing, full stop, right? Exciting rider to watch, always a threat for the podium and the top spot. It's going to be cool to have Jackson back.
It is. I think that any elite racer this year or in 24 in the back of their minds, they were probably thinking, where would Jackson be within this result? And you never want that. You know, it's something that they want all the fast guys to be there. Every one of them will say that. I want, if I win the race, I want to have beaten you all. I don't want anyone to say, but someone else wasn't here. Yeah. So I think that's going to be embraced by everyone. He's an exciting guy to watch. He's an exciting guy because his style's so different from Bruni's. So you've got this sort of the veteran, you know, guy who's winning, and you've got the Pierron style, and then you've got the Jackson style, and it's great to have him back. But it's going to be a different team setup for him, because when you see how the team is, there's sort of him and Laurie, and then you've got these young guns coming through. You know, they've got Ellie's on the team now, who's moved across from the Union, and young Felix, who I know really well. I coach Felix. He's moved on to that team. So it will be interesting from PT's point of view, is like how he balances that sort of focus. Yeah. Because Laurie's going to need a lot of focus. He's coming back in, and, you know, Laurie's one of these riders that he's had his sort of health troubles and not really been himself, but to see him get back to it at Montserrat and finish the year strong, that's, here we go. So you've got the elite boys who are going to be pushing on, but then you've also got these two young guns coming through as well. Yeah, and Nina Hoffman in the mix. Like, there's a good energy in that pit, I think, with everyone fit and healthy and back. Like, I can see that pit bouncing a bit more this year. Yeah, exactly. Having more vibe. And that's what you want. You need you want it to be a happy pit. And I think that sometimes if you're worried that it's that, you know, the smiles aren't there, then it's tough for everyone, and then people start to critique what's going on in that, and no one wants that. Yeah, you know, PT's a wise old owl, so he'll want to keep him under. I'm sure he'll love the word old in that sentence. Let's just talk briefly about those two juniors. So Ellie Hulsebosch, I had on the podcast back in December, and I was pretty blown away by like how on it she is for someone of her age, and I've listened to her on another podcast as well subsequently. I would be nervous if I had to compete against Ellie Hulsebosch. Like, she seems to have ticked all the boxes. She seems chill with it. She seems to enjoy that process. Like, I think it's quite, I feel it's quite unusual to see that much like commitment to a process and trying to tick all those boxes at that age. Quite often riders are relying a little more on talent, and the process comes later. But it felt like Ellie's ahead of the curve. Within mountain biking, absolutely. Okay. I think this is interesting, because if you look outside of this sport and you were to, if you were to discuss that approach within a, you know, an athlete, for example, or in a gymnast or something like that, it would be much more common. Okay. But she's definitely come in with, she's got a really good group of people around her. I worked with her in 24 on the Union, and she's got a good group of people around her at home who input a lot for her. Yeah. And, you know, she believes what they're doing and wants to sort of work within that framework. And I think that she's really setting herself up very well for success. Yeah. I think the only thing you've got to be careful of is you still got to get to the start line and enjoy what's going on. And sometimes you can just maybe put yourself under a little bit of pressure to force that result. Yeah. Okay. And we could see, like, in practice, this year she practiced incredibly well, and then we saw glimpses of what she's going to be able to do in a race run. Yeah. And I think that's probably a fair reflection of her season. Is she's incredibly good, and she has some fantastic results. And I think once we sort of see that pure practice speed and flair translate consistently into the race runs, she's going to be a very strong junior. Definitely. And Felix Griffiths, one to watch, first year junior. His brother Oscar moving into second year, we'll talk about in a little bit, but I've seen him ride, and he's not shy of a bit of speed. No, Felix is sort of similar in his approach to Ellie. So I think they're going to be quite similar and work quite well together in that respect, because Felix likes everything lined up. Okay. Like, I've worked with Felix for a number of years now, and he likes everything. You know, we'll have these phone calls, and I'll be like, I'm fascinated that this is what he wants from the phone call, in a positive way. Yeah, okay. You know, he's got a really tight schedule. He wants to work to a tight schedule. He doesn't like ambiguity. He wants real clear, like, what am I doing this for? What am I going to get the best for? Yeah. He does a lot of traveling. Like, he's going away for quite a long period coming up. I'm off to New Zealand on Monday, and he's going down there similar time, and then he's off really for the rest of the month. So he's going to be, I think that, again, it's always a double-edged sword, because you've got Laurie and Jackson, who you're probably just going to want to hang on to the coattails of. But if you don't hang on to the coattails, is that going to be frustrating? Is it going to be something that you can accept? Or are you going to be able to go, actually, I need to work on me and not worry about them.
Yeah.
I'm going to get there. So he's frighteningly fast. I heard that PT was riding with him in Loser and found as though like doing a chest cam following him was more of a challenge than PT was expecting.
And to be fair, Pete ain't slowed down, has he?
Yeah, exactly that. We're talking about Steve P here. So, yeah.
Fair play. Let's talk about Frameworks Racing. So impressive that Nico's been able to keep that project going and get points to put himself in contention for being a top 15 team. Good effort. Taking a bit of a step back from World Cup racing, I think going to be on the sidelines doing the line spotting, which is going to be a very valuable asset for the team, no doubt. Angel Suarez stays with the team, rapid rider, podium capable, exciting, ace of a Met, new Red Bull helmet, back fully healthy. No one can doubt that speed, and he's going to be hungry to get the overall, I'm sure, and coming in the world champ stripes. And then Alan Newkirk moving to the team, which I think is super exciting. Like, I know Nico was very excited about it. We had a brief chat, and I think he's got a lot of confidence in her ability to deliver some pretty special results.
That's a really exciting team for me. I think I'm a big fan of Martin Whiteley. I think he's a very savvy operator. He's a very clever guy, and he's sort of embedded within that team. And when you see Anna on track this year in 24, one of the common comments was, just wait till she gets on a team that can really support her and help develop her and her bike. And I think we're going to see the fruits of that. And Asa, again, he's one of these sort of generational talents that comes through, and I've really enjoyed his battles with Max Alran. I think they're really cool, like the sort of chalk and cheese a little bit.
Yeah.
I really think that's good for the sport, quite exciting. And I think I also like that project. I've said to Nico, I really like what he does with that project, and I think they're also quite flexible. They want to make a change or an adaptation or, go belt drive, maybe they can. You know what I mean? All these things, it allows them to do these things quite quickly. And I think from that point of view, they're small and agile, but they've still got these heavy hitters.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting for sure. Let's talk about the YT mob, because the YT have definitely doubled down and continued to commit to investing in downhill, which is good to see. So we've got Oceana Callahan, Valley Hole staying with the team, Shana Hearn stepping back and focusing on like Crankworks, Continental Series, US racing, which is cool move for her. I think she was really happy about that. And then we've got the big news, I guess, Andy Kolb joining, which I know you know Andy well, we can talk about that. And also Casper Woolley coming over full-time from Enduro into downhill, a rider that he put down a 40th at World Champs, and I know he felt very kind of out of his depth on setup and process and stuff, and then managed an 18th at Mont Saint Anne at the final round, which is pretty incredible from a literally zero kind of time on a downhill bike. Give us your thoughts on that, Scott, because I think that's a pretty exciting project.
That's a pretty exciting project, and you could see that they YT were investing and had the long term in their minds when they brought that new truck to Leogang.
Yeah.
So they had a really nice new sort of pretty impressive rig, and you're like, you don't spend that sort of money if you're not thinking about bringing things forward and forward and forward. And like, amazing move for Andy. I think it's really exciting. I think you can see Andy's ambition. When he first joined the Atherton team, he was very much like an unknown privateer, and then he grew sort of under G and Charlie, and then sort of came up alongside Charlie, and now I think he wants to maybe spread his wings and feel as though maybe the YT mob can offer a bit more support, maybe in whichever way he thinks he needs it. And I think he'll be a really good teammate for Valley. I think that Valley almost would benefit more from having Andy as a teammate than she would another female, because I think it would have been difficult for her and Sean to really like gel and discuss things and critique things and sort of get the most out of Valley potentially. And same for Sean. I think it would have been difficult for Sean to feel like she was getting the most out of that relationship. But Andy and Valley, I think, are quite similar in Andy's real straight to the point. Like, this is the way we need to do this. That's not going to work. I think you should do this. And that, I think Valley will really like. And although they're not in the same practice, I can see them like sort of working well. But then Oisin is like, such a happy-go-lucky guy that he brings Andy back, because Andy's so much fun. Like he's such a nice guy and such a good fun character that I think he's going to really enjoy riding with Oisin. And
they already, like, you see them running trains down the hill with Ronan at World Cups.
Exactly. It's going to be great. Like, I've commented on it before, like when I see like Andorra was such a good example. Like when G had come back from injury and Andy was there and Charlie was there and Ronan was there and Oisin's there, you know, they're all just having such a good time. And you're like, well, this is what downhill is, because it allows them to express themselves the best. And that's when they go the quickest. And the stuff, the preparation is before that. But I'm excited for Casper, but I think this is the first thing we've touched on today where we're sort of like going, well, what is going to happen to Enduro? Because if you've got someone like Casper coming over to downhill, and as we go through this conversation with the teams, you know, during our conversation today, I think we'll probably see that a lot of those who are at the sharp end of Enduro are sort of turning their back on it and coming into downhill. And that's kind of concerning.
Yeah. Fair. I think that's a separate podcast perhaps, because we could probably go into a lot of detail, but I think totally agree.
This team, like they've got a big team, they've got some, you know, they're sort of looking, it'll be interesting to see how Casper does for sure, because like you say, these downhill bikes take a lot of setting up and a lot to get a rider really comfortable with them, but then also to maximize what the bike can do for them. Because there's so much more that a downhill bike does than an enduro bike.
So for him having that focus from now onwards as well, like he's going to have had so much more time and setup and support from the team to get where he needs to be, that if he can do 18th on a bike that was probably a long way away from perfect for him, then
absolutely.
It's going to be interesting to see. Let's talk Specialized Gravity, and this is one of the teams where, as far as we know anyway, they made an announcement, which I assume is the full announcement. No change to the Specialized Gravity roster. Loic Bruni, Finn Iles, Jordan Williams, very strong team. And actually, no change to a team in a year where there is a lot of structural change. The events are going to feel a bit different. The flow of the event's going to be different. Having everything else around you the same and consistent, probably not a bad thing. And especially when you've got those three riders, they're going to be pretty dangerous, I would imagine.
Yeah, they've got a great setup. That's a really good, established, mature team in what they do. They're very sensible guys. They're Laurent, who runs that program's, you know, a cool operator. He knows what he's doing. And then you've got the whole support network. They've got Jack, super experienced mechanic there, and I think that it helps. You know, it depends what your focus is. And I think that you can see with the Specialized lineup that what they've done is they've gone for the development. We're going to send that to Gen S. We're going to send that to the Continental Series, and we're going to keep that. When they're ready, then they can maybe step up. And if you've got Finn and Loic on the team, they're not having to play a points game like some of the teams are having to do, to go, well, you know, if we want to be present, we need to bring riders in. And sometimes that means multiple riders in multiple categories, and that they're not having to worry about that. So where at Norco, we want to try and have a balance between females and males on the team and go, look, you know, we want to have this sort of bigger rider set up with 3 females and 3 male riders. They're going, you know what, we've got these 3 heavy hitters here already. We don't need to add to this. We're going to keep that. And the development, their development riders are going to be on Gen S. And when they're ready, they can step up then.
Yeah, potentially at higher risk though, because the way I understand it, in October 2025, your team points from your fastest 4 riders dictate whether you get into 26. And that 26 is like a lock-in for either 2 or 3 years. So if they have an injured rider or 2 injured riders, you know, let's face it, we've seen that on teams in the past, they don't have much backup there. So I wonder if there's another rider yet to be announced. But I don't know.
You're right. You're completely right. This is one of the problems or the things we've had to work within, because essentially this year the riders have the points. The riders are the powerhouses. They bring the points to the team. But then at the end of this year, the team has the points, and then the rider will want to be on the team that's there with the points.
Yeah.
But like you say, what happens if you have an injury? I think there's always going to be caveats within this, because let's be honest, you're a madman if you think that Specialized is going to go away because Loic's been injured.
Yeah.
And you're obviously not saying that. But what you're saying is the rules leave that open to interpretation. And I think that's where the communication of these things hasn't been great from the organizer's point of view, because there's still so many question marks. And you'll ask me a number of questions today, and I'll be like, I can't give you the answer. And the problem is I'm a team manager. I should know this. I'm not looking on Vital Forums or Pink Bike for these answers. I should be getting these as official communications. This is what's going on.
Yeah.
But when I'm fishing around, and I'm so lucky I've got Kathy Sessler to lean on. She's like the OG with all of this. And Kathy's like, we haven't got the answer yet, Alan. I'm like, well, why not?
Yeah.
So that's I think what I'm getting back to answer your question in a long-winded way is there is potential risk when you have a small team.
Yeah.
And, that's one of the problems we've got.
We'll see what happens. And it's going to be exciting to see where Jordan Williams slots back in, because he had that incredible start to his elite career. We were expecting this Jordan Jackson battle that never quite came to fruition after that. I think Jordan openly found that mentally challenging to be straight at the very sharp end of things. Big injury, as had Jackson. So those two coming back and hopefully battling it out is going to be cool.
I really hope he's healthy. I really hope he's sort of fully rehabbed and he's got time on the bike and he's ready to go, because he is still going to be considered the understudy. And I think that he should be happy with that. He should be happy to be the understudy behind Finn and Loic and be there, but also probably to be open to learn from them and not to be afraid to go, hey, what do you think? And I think sometimes when you're young and you're able to beat them, maybe you don't want to have that conversation. Hey, Loic, what are you doing here? What about this setup? I simply don't know, but I know someone like Loic would be open to that. He's a lovely bloke, and he, like, a rising tide raises all ships. So, and I think that Loic is happy because he'll feel as though he can learn from Jordan.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, healthy competition.
Exactly.
It's good for the team. Let's talk about Giant. So Remy Thirion, another older dog who's had a good season last year. Luke Meyer-Smith, and then the Jewett brothers, Jacob Jewett and Dane Jewett, joining over from Pivot Factory Racing. Do you think that's a benefit for them? Is there a bit more support perhaps on that level of team?
I think that was an interesting move to see them moving over to Giant. I was really happy to see Remy Thirion stay. I sort of wondered whether this year was his swan song, if I'm honest. I thought maybe, the guy's been around for a long time, and to see him still hungry and still showing this flair, because he's got a certain flair on the track. Like, Remy tries some crazy stuff. Is it going to work? Well, let's find out. Luke Meyer-Smith is a real stalwart there. Like, he's young, but he's very mature, very driven, very focused. And the Jewett brothers have obviously, moved over from Pivot for whatever reasons. I think if you're in a position this year where, like we talked about before, you've got points and you're able to move teams, there probably is a lot of temptation to go, well, what's out there? Is there something that might work better for me? Yeah. And maybe in other years that wouldn't be the case. You'd be like, well, this is where I'm at, this is where I'm going to stay. But this is one of those years where maybe they've sort of opened their eyes, and maybe the doors, the phone's been ringing a bit more than they thought it might, or they were, oh, maybe we should consider this. So it will be interesting, because Giant is one of these companies that, by its name, it's a big company.
Yeah, huge.
But they've never had a really big presence on the World Cup scene. They've always been a little bit quiet.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day maybe, but in the last sort of 15
well, this is
years,
when Danny and Needles were on it. It was like it still was out of a Sprinter van. I know we didn't have the big trucks back then, but it was still relatively low key. But I never feel as though they really want to shout about what they're doing, and they're not one of these super flashy teams, and that's not meant as a criticism. There's no criticism to that at all, because they go and get the job done. Like, when you, at the end of the day, I think they're one of these teams where they're like, look, we just want success, we want performance, look, can we support our riders? And they clearly do a good job, and they've attracted the Jewett boys to that. It's going to be interesting to see how that one progresses. Orbea FMD have been teasing us daily for a while to see what that team's going to look like. They've announced the squad, so Tiny Seagrave, Phoebe Gale, Ollie Zoir stay, Dara Ryan, a new young junior that I don't think either of us know a huge amount about, but is clearly going to be a pinner. And then Martin Mays. Do we know if he's going to be doing a full downhill program this year? I would assume so. I think so. This is another one of those really interesting moves that, to me, harks back to, ironically, when Martin was on the Athertons and GT moved over. So GT came over and they basically had Mark Beaumont contracted with GT. Yeah. And then he came over with his mechanic, Mark Morrison, who actually was Martin's mechanic for a number of years. Yeah. But he sort of came over as part of the package. And I'm not it's worth saying this is my understanding, and I may well be wrong, but my understanding is Martin probably came over with the Orbea package.
Okay, yeah.
So I'd be really interested to see how they work together, and I think Tony Seagrave, Tane's dad, who manages that, will very much want to ingratiate Martin within that setup, and Martin will want to go about and do his job, and when you see how they were running that development program, because essentially Orbea were prototyping a lot, and they sort of had an e-bike with no motor and no battery in it, and that was their chassis, and I was wondering whether they were sizing up for a gearbox to go straight into that chassis, but that was like out of an easy up with a couple of mechanics, and it was very low key. And I think Martin is more low key kind of guy. He's a lovely bloke, a family man. He's got his kids, he lives on some land, and he rides his bike faster than most people we know. So to have him in this much flashier, when you go from talking about Giant to going to talk about FMD, who will sing from the rooftops about what they're up to and make it look cool, I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
Because
a lot more cameras in his face, more media attention.
Exactly. And I can't imagine we're going to get a full 60 panoramic of Martin sat on a bike in a speed suit like we did of Tane. That's not Martin's style.
You never know.
You know what I mean? So I think that to me is going to be how he's going to fit within that. And if Martin's happy and he's got what he needs, he's dangerous.
Oh, for sure. 20th world champs, 21st at Fort William. I have an easy up on.
And he smoked everyone in France a few years ago. He came off straight off. I had a gap in a weekend, so I decided to race downhill and I beat you all. Mic drop, off he goes back to enduro. And that's what I love about Martin. And he's such a friendly guy with it. Yeah. But I think on the outside can maybe look quite serious. And maybe this is what FMD will break down.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see, whether we see a different side to Martin for sure. Yeah. Goodman Santa Cruz, for me, this is one of the most exciting teams in the pits because they've got a lot of I've described loose riders, like riders that are incredibly talented and like to go all in, or at least look like they're riding all in. So we've got Nathan Pontvian, second year elite, Milan Fauquet moving into elite, Thomas Estak, awesome, talented rider to watch, podium and an 8th place in 2024, Thibaut Lally, Lisa Bouladou, and then 2 young riders, again, which we don't know heaps about, apologies to them, Raoul Schneeberger and Rowan Cross.
You sort of hit the nail on the head, and I'm really excited to see what these guys can do because of their sort of rawness.
Yeah, that's it. That's the right way to describe it.
And then when we've just had this discussion, it makes me think, why aren't the unions still here? Because that's what they brought to the table. Because everyone was like, what is Chris Hauser going to do this weekend? What is XYZ going to do? Ellie, what is Lockie? And that's like a really sad thing that I'm so happy that this Santa Cruz Goodman team are there.
Yeah, it feels like if you're a union fan, this is your new team.
This is exactly that. This is where your allegiance is gonna be the sort of relegation zone team that are plucky and gonna come up the table. Like, come on, let's get you mid-table. And I think that's what we want to see. We want to see these riders who haven't had this sort of kind of gilded start to their career, shall we say, and we want to see them develop. And that's what the fear is that I think that goes around. It's like, well, can we get this development? Is it still going to be there, or have you got to come in at the very top at 16? And that's something that I hope this team can really do, because and we need to tell that story, because there is that story to be told.
And it's going to be interesting to see if a team like that can survive into the 26 onwards period, right? I think that's the real challenge for this underdog story, because they're continuing where the union left off, perhaps, and hopefully they've got enough points to either get into top 15 or a wild card. They've certainly got a decent roster there
at the end of
it. But at the end of 25 or in October 25, do they continue? And I think that's going to be interesting to watch. So good luck, Goodman Santa Cruz.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And like we were saying, it's this sort of product that's there. And don't forget that part of this is, where's he come from? Look at this result. He flying in practice, won qualifying. And that's the sort of thing that I think is going to make people look for them and find out what they're up to.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Good luck. Right, Scott Factory. Fairly recently announced, it was fairly strongly rumoured, but they keep Ethan Crate, Dylan Levesque, Gonzalo Bandiera, and add Benoit Coulange to the mix. Benoit comes with Michelin tyres, whether he bought them across or whether the team have shifted, but it means less change for Benoit. That's going to be exciting, I think, because Dorval Commencal are very slick setup, but on the smaller end, Scott definitely a team that have got I would assume, a bit more funding and kind of growing their setup.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that move, and I'm excited to see. For me, it's the link with Flo Pai that I think will be really cool for me. Like, Flo's their sort of coach on that team, and he's a lovely bloke, very intelligent guy. He's always he wants the best for the sport to progress. So we're on this sort of committee, for want of a better word, where we're trying to make sure the tracks are safe and everything runs smoothly across a weekend.
Okay.
And he's very good at that. He's very good at saying this was done brilliantly, well done. And he's very good at saying, hey, this is dangerous, it needs sorting. And alongside that, he's a very savvy guy. And I think that to see him with Coulange, I hope that, I don't know, I hope Flo's continuing that setup, because I think that would be a real asset to Benoit. I don't know what he had. Like, I don't know Benoit. And I think he's one of the people that I think's got a really funny sense of humor, and he's self-deprecating.
Yeah.
And he's quite happy to look at himself and sort of take the mick a little bit, and I think that's really cool. So I think that's going to be a really interesting move, and I'm interested to see how they work together. And I think that Benoit's one of these guys that has just got so much. He's got so much speed, but it's almost hidden. When you see him riding, you're like, he's gonna be fast, but it's almost like he's not super wild in his riding sometimes, and you're like, oh, okay, but to use that team setup, he'll want to make sure he's got the people around him he wants.
Yeah.
And I think that him and Flo could work really well. So if that is going to be something that happens, then that would be really cool.
Yeah, and Benoit, I would say, doesn't come across anyway as a kind of big out there, like, showman kind of guy. Not maybe like super happy to do loads of media and have cameras in his face all day, rather like deal with the tech, get on with the job, break it all down. And I think I get the feeling Scott as a team is a bit more like that as well. Like, they're not shouty, they're not doing heaps of media, there isn't a huge video series following everyone around. Like, I think that is a good fit. I feel like Benoit will be comfortable there. Yeah,
I think that, again, their team manager is one of the very experienced guys, and he sort of wants to run a program that it's like a long-term view of how it's going to work. We're going to do this for the season. This is how we're going to go about it. And to have, for me, Ethan, who's come back from injuries, is a huge talent and can really produce speed. Goncalvo's in there as well, who again is lightning fast, rides with Ronan a lot. And those guys maybe have more flair. And then Benoit's got the raw speed and like the experience. So you bring them together, and if they can gel, again, this is where I think we talk about a team versus a collection of individuals. Is like, are they going to be a collective, a really good team?
Yeah.
And that would be really interesting to see. And I really hope they can, I'd love to see, Ethan's a lovely guy, and I'd love to see him like show what he can do consistently and stay healthy, and we'll see where he goes.
Yeah, I feel like Ethan and Benoit could be quite a good partnership. I think they're both quite measured, calm.
Exactly.
Like smart, intelligent.
Yeah.
I think that could be quite a good mix, the two of them.
Yeah, and I think this is where these younger riders need to lean on the more experienced guys, because I'd say 90% of the time an experienced rider is quite happy to share his knowledge. He's got no problem, because ultimately, if he's worrying about you, he probably wouldn't be there. You know what I mean? He's worrying about himself. But if you're going to there say, hey, what are you doing here? What about this? I think that Benoit is going to be really good for that. So it could be good for all the other riders there too.
Yeah, interesting one to watch. Let's talk about Intense Factory Racing. Joe Breeden, guy you know very well. Fair play to Joe for putting that team together last year and then continuing through into this year. So Joe Breeden retains Oscar Griffiths, Louisiana Ferguson, and then Millie Johnson added onto the team, which another like
great move.
Raw, incredible pace, hasn't all quite gelled for like consistency just yet, I would say, but surely a podium and potential win threat there.
Absolutely. The two things that excite me about that team setup, well, there's a few actually. One of them is this year you had, to me, maybe it was a bit of a strange aligning where you had MS Intense, which was a really big presence, but then you had Intense Factory that was a smaller presence, but they were the factory team.
Yeah.
And now I think that with MS splitting from Intense and maybe all the focus now going to Joe's team, that's probably a real benefit for Joe.
Yeah.
There won't be any sort of like dilution of what Intense can bring.
Yeah.
And I really like the fact they're going to this gearbox, and it's quite exciting.
It's very exciting.
And Joe's really into the development side of it. He's very savvy. He's very he thinks a lot. He's a thinker.
He's an I don't think he has training in engineering, but he thinks like an engineer.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the stuff that we've, like, in years past where he was struggling with the suspension manufacturer and the way he was going about to prove the issues that he was having and articulate them was really impressive. I was like, oh, you can't question that. That's brilliant. The way you've explained that.
Yeah.
So I think from that point of view, it's really good. But also from Millie's point of view, joining that team. So Millie was under sort of Fabian at Canyon, and Fabian, an amazing guy, very experienced, very intelligent. It's going to be done this way. And now she's going to be on Intense, where they've got Ollie Morris, which is a very different style of coaching and support.
Yeah.
So you've gone from not one extreme to another, but a very different style of support. So I think for Millie, that could be quite an exciting opportunity to keep developing, because I think we'll see more of Millie. I think Millie she's got sometimes when you see her riding on the track, she looks incredible. Other times she's a bit out of shape. And when she gets that consistency, you see when she's on the podium. To have that around her, I think would be really good. It'd be good for them to have a good presence. Those two girls, again, like we've talked about before, like you get two girls who are willing to work together. I'd say that Louise's style on a bike and sort of position on the bike is really good. And again, you've got Millie's sort of more bulldog attitude towards it. You bring those two together, it could be they could learn off each other.
It's going to be really interesting. Again, Lou, like, I think when the self-belief is there, the talent clearly is, and when they come together and meet, then the results arrive. And so having someone else to ride on the hill with and like share those practice sessions with and share GoPro with and all that kind of stuff. I think it's like you say, the whole rising tide lifts all ships. Like,
I think
it's good for both of them.
And I think sometimes you find that if you've got two girls riding together, they can bring each other up. Sometimes the men want to, I'm now got to a point where I want to ride on my own now, sort of thing. They're like, right, I'm going to do my thing. But I think sometimes converging versus diverging can be really helpful. And I've seen it almost even more helpful when you've got two females together. Go, hey, let's push on. And like Tane, on that setup when they're working through, her name escapes me, who's Phoebe. So Tane and Phoebe together, that's been really positive. And then Oscar, I think it'd be interesting with Oscar and Joe, because we're at a point where Joe probably, and I don't know this, but I could guess, is working so hard to keep that team moving and the sponsors and the engineering side of it and dealing with Intense and all the rest of it. Is he able to fully focus on the nuts and bolts of being a pro athlete?
Fair.
And then you've got Oscar, who is so hungry and young. What happens when Oscar's nipping at Joe's heels and going, actually, maybe I'm going a bit quicker here? How's Joe going to respond to that? So that's going to be really interesting, because I don't want to see Joe. I want to see Joe show himself as that pro rider. And I think it's very hard to be player manager. So
Joe strikes me as one of these people a little bit like Nico that has an incredible capacity to get things done, but it still takes its toll. And anyone that's working both sides of that is going to find it hard.
Unfortunately, to find Nico, like you just said, Nico's moving to a side because maybe he found it was getting too much. And I think what I'd love to see is Joe to realize and keep riding at that really highest level. And he rides a lot with Charlie, and obviously Charlie's hauling, so I think that keeps him at that sharp end. And that's going to be a cool team,
definitely. And while we're on the topic of gearboxes, MS have announced that they're partnering with Zeroed for 2025, and they've got a pretty big squad. So Eleonora Farina, Tuto Enrique Penne, Jacob Dixon, Valentina Rose Sanchez, Gloria Scarzi, and Sebastian Holquin, with Dave Trummer on track doing line spotting and that side of things. That's a pretty powerful lineup, and MS aren't shy of pit setup and all that side of things. They've definitely got a pretty slick operation. Could be interesting to see how that all pans out.
I'd say that MS, I think it would be hard to argue they underperformed this year. I think that there was a number of weekends where they weren't there on race day and this huge pit setup was vacant, and that was really sad to see. And there are various reasons for that, with injuries and what have you. But it's because of that, I'm really excited to see almost this fresh start and to go, okay, Eleonora had that win and that was really cool. I think a lot of people felt as though that was very much deserved. She's a very consistent performer, and, she did a brilliant job in those conditions at Leger and deserve that. I think that Jacob, again, he's one of these guys that is lightning fast, and I think he can show himself. And David, I think maybe have succumbed to some of his injuries. The poor guy was. It was really interesting. So when I was working on the Athertons with Andy was always bridesmaid to Trummer. Trummer was always number 1 Austrian and Andy was number 2. And then it kind of got to that point where they were fighting. And then just as Andy was sort of really rising, David had injury and then came back and then another injury. And he was really trying to fight back. And I don't know whether that's one of the reasons he's moved, but David's very, again, in terms of support, he'll be a great support for them.
Yeah.
And to bring Valentina in, again, one of these riders, I think not quite on the same level as Anna, but someone who on transition had very little support. I got to know a manager quite well trackside this year, and he's a lovely guy and is was fully behind her, but maybe wasn't able to, with that team, really.
Yeah, it was a small setup, right?
Small setup.
Yeah.
And again, they probably physically weren't going to be able to be there in 25. Yeah. So for her to find this home, I think would be really cool.
That is really exciting. Yeah. A team that potentially are going to struggle to get into that top 15 automated qualifying place there, right? Which in itself is interesting because that's a huge investment, a huge lineup.
There you go.
Part of this Gates 100k belted purse for Gearbox bikes. Like there's excitement around it. We've got some great riders in that list. But like you say, the performance wasn't there in the grand scheme of things for 2024, and that puts them in a tricky position. Wild card, I mean, they do have this very impressive pit setup. It does look very good. I guess that's attractive and like probably the direction that Warner Brothers would like to see things going as far as pits looking good and having options for hospitality and all that kind of stuff. So I would guess they'd get a wild card. But it is interesting that a team with, I would say, quite a large budget could potentially not make that automated cut.
Yeah, it's a bit of a head scratcher, isn't it? Because if it's purely on just the race results, then they're not there.
Yeah.
Simple as that. But if you are at a World Cup and you see their setup and you see how it works and the link with Red Bull and the link with everything there, why would you not want them present? And I think that although there's these 5 wild cards, I do get the feeling as though there's there's another 8 sort of race by race wild cards.
Yes.
But you can't sell that to a sponsor. You can't say, hey, I need this much money for the season, but I might only go to one of the races or whatever. I get the feeling as though there's conversations. These teams will be having conversations with Warner Brothers and UCI to go, hey, look, if I'm going to get there, I need some reassurance that I'm going to get there. And I think that, although I don't know, my guess would be that they'd have more information on this than me, because there's no way that I'd be able to go to a sponsor and say, hey, this is what we're planning to do, because I know what their first question would be. Well, are you going to be at all the races?
Are you definitely there?
I don't know, mate.
Yeah.
So there's got to be this, and no one wants that sort of thing to go away. But the problem is if your riders aren't getting to that final and they're on race day, it's not great. Like I've been there when I've Sunday morning, day off, it's horrific.
Yeah.
So you don't want that more than once a year.
100%. One more team that's confirmed, and then we'll get into the rumours as it stands today. So Commencal Schwalbe by Les Orres, I believe they're now called. Lisa Baumann, Jack Piercy, Austin Dooley, Bodie Burke and Matilda Melton. Cool squad, good riders. Dooley, huge amount of potential there. Yep. Lisa Baumann, loads of potential. Also, I doubt enough points to make the top 15 cut, and potentially, they don't have the big pit setup, they don't have that MS kind of presence, could struggle to get a wild card as well, which in and of itself is an interesting one, right?
Yeah, this is one of those teams that in the same sort of conversation as MS, but are probably going to be out of easy ups, and it's maybe going to be harder for them to argue that team presence. Lisa Baumann, I believe, has the same coach as Valley. I think the Ravenels work with them, so she's come up, and I think that she rides with Valley, and I think they've got, I may be wrong, but I think they've got a pretty good relationship. And I
think that's right.
I think having that as a development, maybe this sort of team will be considered a development team for someone. Whether Commencal will list them as a development team, and that's the way you piggyback on.
So they can pull riders in to certain races from the development squad.
And so that might be I don't know if that's what they've done,
right.
But like you have with Specialized and Gen S, and I have no basis for this comment, but if a team such as Commencal was to lean on another Commencal team, then maybe you would formally link the two to say, look, this is our development team, and that might work for both parties.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Yeah, well, I guess we'll find out in 3 weeks' time, really, like what this all actually looks like. Okay, let's move into the TBCs for now. Commencal Muck-Off, I believe, retains Amaury Piron. I should say this is all based on rumours from mostly Vital MTB. Thanks, Vital, for the forum. Commencal Muck-Off, Amaury Piron, Max Aran, Till Aran, Miriam Nicole. I've put a question mark by Dylan Maples. Don't know if he's still there or not. Sure. And we believe world champion Loris Vergier will be joining that squad. I mean, that is a power team already, and throw in Loris to the mix and it just gets stronger.
Exactly.
But that's an interesting move. That's a big change for Loris. A lot of componentry change. You're pairing up against Amaury Piron, who at points last season was absolutely formidable and looked unbeatable. Good, bad? How do you see that one stacking up?
To me, this is almost the opposite of what Specialized have done. So Specialized have gone, we've got this real core that we're going to keep, and we're going to keep it very small. And Commencal are going, well, maybe we lose some of these other teams, but we want the heavy hitters here. And I think Loris, it's not for me to say his motivations to leave Trek or move on at all. I don't know what they are, but for him to move into that setup is exciting but brave. Because you're sort of going into the lion's den a little bit. And I don't know his relationship with Amaury. I know he's very close to Loic, and I know those boys get on really well, so you could see that move, if you see what I mean. It wouldn't have surprised me if he went, if you go down the Specialized route and you're going to be back with your mates sort of thing, then no problem. I don't know what his relationship is with Amaury, but the way they've set things up there, they've got a very good engineer who... from my understanding, basically, you've got a guy who's got a lot of control over how the bike's set up, and he's very, very good at saying, this is the bike we're going to run, this is how we're going to work, and the rider going to ride this bike. And I think they do an awful lot of testing. They're doing a lot of stuff with some component stuff. I've got some interesting insights into some of the stuff they're doing, which is really cool, and it keeps people like me on my toes, because I'm not there to sort of kind of copy, but to understand, right, they're putting a lot of effort into this, for sure, and they're not leaving any stones unturned. So they want to really be there, and for them to have this resurgence, because 12 months ago you had Amaury on a long injury layoff, Miriam on a long injury layoff, and for them to be back and healthy is brilliant. And then to bring in Loris into that mix, I'd love to see how they work together, because are they going to work together, or is it going to be, are we at that stage of a team where it's almost like the old Yamaha MotoGP garage, where you've sort of got one half of the garage and the other half of the garage, and maybe that'll work just fine. Yeah,
who knows? And I mean, Loris is sort of famously renowned as quite a puzzler, and maybe that takes some of that out of his hands, and it'd be interesting to see whether that plays to his advantage or his disadvantage. Like, if he can get comfortable with that and trust their engineer, then surely that's a weight off. If you're not turning up wondering which shock you're going to run and what spoke tension and all of this, like, that's the bike and I trust that engineer, he says it's good, like, that's got to clear a lot of mental capacity to go and perform.
Exactly that. And I think this harks back to my comments around Danny. If you've got someone that is going to say, this is the way we're going to do that, that's really going to work, then you can try it. And if you disagree with it, then you can come back with a clear disagreement. But it does take a lot of pressure off you, I think, as a rider, because you've got someone who's basically sold you, hey, this is going to work for this reason and that reason. The rider rides it and goes, hey, the man's got a point. All I need to do is ride really quickly. I don't have to worry about these sorts of little things. And that mental capacity. A race weekend is incredibly full on. It really is just flat out. I'm glad I'm not, well, if I was paid by the hour, I'd be doing better, put it that way.
Fair. Be interesting. Good move. Right, Canyon Collective, they've announced Marine Cabaret, which we can talk about. Don't think they've fully announced the entire squad. I assume Troy, Brosnan, Lucas Shaw are staying. What I don't know is Henry Kerr and Henry Kiffer, both good riders that have been on Canyon non-factory programs, whether they come in any capacity. And also Letha Ostergaard, super fast rider, up and comer, that's been pictured on a few occasions on the prototype Canyon, which you would assume means some kind of link to that squad. But I think Marine Cabaret is the big story. Incredible rider, lots of talent, and having that support from Fabian
This would be the interesting link.
Yeah, I can see that working well.
Yeah, I think this would be the interesting link. I think that Marine was talking to a number of teams. I think she had an opportunity to move in the way she wanted to coming into 25, and probably had a lot of options that she wanted to weigh up and decide what's going to be best for her. And you can understand that link with Fabian. If she's can work with Fabian closely, I think she probably will work quite well with Fabian. So that could be a really exciting one. I thought I'd seen something just quite soon after Mont Saint Anne that Troy had re-upped with them.
That's true. Yes, that was the case. You're
so
right.
I think it was quite early on. It was like we've
yeah, they re-signed.
Yeah, I think there was. I think before he won Mont Saint Anne, maybe it was a little bit more flexible to what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And then they were like, hang on a second, we can't let this guy go.
I'm excited to see if he can carry that momentum. Like Dad Life was suiting him pretty well at the end of last year. So
yeah, it's if you're happy, that's a big part of a lot of things. And it really is. When things are going well, everything looks easy.
Yeah.
And when things aren't going well, like I've got quite into my football over the past 12 months, and I found it really interesting to see like the change in Man City. And I know who wants to hear about me talking about football? I am not an expert on football. But when you see what Pep Guardiola must be going through, and you're thinking, this can't be easy. And then just in the past week, you see things aren't going that well for the poor guy. He's really struggling. You flip it on its head. You understand that things can fly and everything's okay. But when they're not, it really is hard. So I think from the reason I give you that poor anecdote is to try and help. If a rider's happy and he's got good support and it works for him, then it will work really well and the results will come.
Yeah.
But if things are tricky, then it's really important for the team to try and help that. And this isn't just, I think Troy's enjoying Dad Life, got a great result. He's like, well, why would I change anything? This is exactly what I need. I've got a good crew around me. And I think Gabe, I find Gabe and Fabian like a really interesting
so different
duo.
They're
so different, and I think that they've very much got their strengths. Like Gabe, as the manager of the team and looking after that side, and he's like quite jolly and quite like he sort of says it as it is a little bit, and it's like you can have some fun. And then Fabian is like
performance. Yeah.
And you've got to work with that. And with Henry Kiefer. Again, he's one of these juniors that maybe came up in the shadow of the Jackson and the Jordan.
Yeah.
But we haven't quite seen him really perform to his best. And then Henry Kerr, lightning fast rider. Whenever that guy gets it put together, he's phenomenal. He can crash a bike, unfortunately. But I don't know how he'll fit. I just don't know.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where those two end up. But yeah, I think by the time this goes out, we'll probably have had an announcement and this will all be out of date. Apologies. Right, Mondraker Factory, Dakota Norton, Ronan Dunn, Ryan Pinkerton. I believe that stays the same. Haven't heard anything different, but we'll see. Significant injury for Dakota.
Yeah. Poor Dakota. It was really tough. I really feel for him because he's worked so hard to build up this sort of base at home. He wants everything there. He's worked so hard on his house. He loves his moto. He's got that all around him. And then at the end of the season, he finds it's a stressful thing racing bikes. And I think Dakota finds racing hard. He works hard at it. And then he wants to be able to switch off after and go, right, I need to rest now. I need to go and enjoy something. So I think he went to Hawaii and sort of zoned out and had a really good time. And then was probably really excited to get back to riding his moto and, staying really active, because these guys don't sit on the sofa for weeks on end. They're riding motorbikes and dirt jump and pump track and whatever else.
Yeah. And
then to have that crash on the motorbike where I think there was a mechanical problem and he's basically punted his femur through his pelvis from the sounds of it. So that's a bad injury. And I think that the fact that he's non-weight bearing for quite a significant period, it's going to be tough mentally as much as physically. I think he's really going to feel it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
But he'll come back. He'll come back and he'll be as fast as ever. And, it's just, I really would like to see those high bars at round one again. We want to keep that whole thing there because, I've worked with Dakota this year and I really hope that I can kind of help him in that process to get back. And then we've got Ronan, he's in New Zealand at the moment. and he's just full gas.
Is he ever anything else?
It's just full gas. It's just fascinating. It was funny because I was with Charlie the other day. We were training, and I think Ronan had sent me a message saying I'd done X number of runs, and then I'd been into the gym, like 10 downhill runs or something. I'd been in the gym, and I was like, dude, that's a full on day. Like, take some rest. And then I think he sent Charlie something the next morning going, I'm cooked. And it was really, and Charlie was laughing because we were sort of discussing. I was like, I don't know how he does it. And he's like, no, the boy's tired now.
Okay,
and I was like, good.
He's not superhuman.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's really good at sharing. Like, he shares a lot of the stats with me, so I can kind of keep up with it. Yeah. And I sort of like try and pull the reins on a little bit sometimes, and sometimes like, mate, it's amazing, just make sure you're doing X, Y, and Z to keep it fueled, because he likes riding fast. I think with Ronan, he rides consistently at such a high speed that it just becomes normal. And that's, if your 85% speed is in the top 1% in the world, then you're fine.
Doing all right, yeah.
So I think that's the way he's definitely looking at it.
Yeah, and Pinky's always good to watch, so
Pinky's great to watch, and I think they've they're all very different characters. They've got 3 very different characters within that team, and that was a new team again this year. So they've got some growing and learning that they'll have done this year to decide how do we get the most from our athletes. Yeah, and what Dakota needs is very different from what Pinky needs or what Ronan needs.
Totally.
And so from a management point of view, like Jorge has done a good job there, and I think he's having these conversations to make sure that if Ronan wants to be riding full gas a lot, he can support that.
Yeah.
And then if Pinky wants to do this, he can support that. And if Dakota wants to test something, which Dakota's more cerebral like that, I think, trying to work through this stuff.
Yeah.
He can support that too. So
that's great. Yeah, let's hope Dakota gets back. Like, best of luck, Dakota, for healing up and such a big part of the story in 24, and it feels very unfinished. So let's hope we see him back.
I'm sure we will
on the bike sooner rather than later.
Yeah, too right.
Trek Factory Racing still unconfirmed as we talk today, but as confirmed as an unconfirmed team get when their team names are next to the riders on the entry for the Windrock National. So Lockie Stevens, McNabb, Ollie Davis, Matt Walker, the UK version, Sasha Ernest and Chris Hauser. I'm quite excited about that. Very young, very different from Trek Factory Racing of old, but huge brand, I would assume, decent sized budget, lots of support. Should be good.
That would be a really interesting team. Quite exciting team. I'd say that like Lockie, it was the natural move to go from the Union, who were on Trek, to move into that setup. And I think they were courting him this year to sort of say, look, this is the direction we'd like you to move in, and we'll support you on the bike and keep that moving. And Ollie, they're such good friends. Like Ollie Davis was on Union as well. He's good friends with Lockie. I can see the attraction. I think the attraction is to be with Lockie and have that good times with him sort of thing, to be there. It'll be interesting for Trek as well. So if you sort of like flip it, you've got some different characters. Like Matt Walker, that sounds as though that's going to happen. Again, we might be corrected, but if his name's written down with that, it's not the first time I've heard that link. Matt's, again, a different character to those boys, and he'll want maybe some different things from them. Yeah. But Trek had, I think the way I see Trek is it's quite a big company with quite a clear, like, this is what we want. This is what we're looking for. And they've completely cleared house this year, and it's all fresh. And that
Sasha stays, but
Sasha stays. Sorry, but to see the other riders all move out, and I don't know their reasons behind it, but you wonder whether Trek are reflecting to go, hey, we should change our approach. We maybe need to support our riders in a different way, or give more flexibility, or let them do X, Y, and Z. Or actually, whether they're looking at the riders that they want to bring in and go, look, these guys are going to work with it well within our framework. This is the framework we want. Yeah. And we want our riders to work within this framework. And then they've explained that to their riders, and the riders are going, hey, that's what we need. Then that will be interesting to see, because I think that maybe this is a segue onto Reese's team, but I think that Reese is one of these riders where he likes to do things differently. He's a really creative guy. When you see, I don't know Reese. I'm not mates with Reese. I don't really know him, but I've got a lot of respect for the way he rides a bike, because he never wants to just follow. Yeah. Yeah, he gets creative. But I think that could also be frustrating, because if you're there and you're trying to sell the idea of doing this, because this is what I've seen, this is what I think will work for you, and he's like, well, by the very nature of you telling me that, I'm going to do this. Then if your team is frustrated by that, you would be frustrated by that.
Yeah.
So it's like a two-way street, and I think that this move that Reese has made to a kind of his own team, I guess he's team owner in this respect, and he's working with Paul at Net Performance to bring together this group of sponsors and go down the belt drive route. He's going to have I think probably a really fun year doing it. I think he's going to enjoy that process, and I think he's going to feel that he can tell his story doing it.
Yeah.
And maybe he didn't feel like he could do that on Trek.
Yeah.
And I'll be quite happy for him to tell me I'm talking absolute rubbish, but it would be, that's the way I see it. So
that's
from
fair.
the outside.
Before we move away from Trek, there is a new bike been pictured, so potentially a full change. Literally,
a lot going on.
Yeah,
a lot going on.
Let's move on to AON Racing, which was rumoured to mean all or nothing, or stand for all or nothing. I don't know if that's true or not. Reese can tell us, I'm sure, at some point. And very unfortunately, I think they announced on Friday and we're sat here on Thursday. So when this goes out, it'll be out of date. Rumours around Greg Williamson would be cool. Monica Hrasnik, Heather Wilson, Hattie Harnden potentially.
Yeah.
I know Hattie's also a Net Performance athlete. I know Hattie has the Trek connection with Reese, so you can kind of believe that. Reese said in a sleeper video that came out yesterday, that they will also have a free rider involved with the team, which got me wondering about Cade, but I don't know. Trek tend to keep their free riders, but also Reese and Cade are good mates. Yeah. So, I mean, lots of speculation, but it's cool, right? Sure. This is a team that's come out of nothing, effectively, that Reese has put together. We've got confirmed Junior, Net Performance and Gamex as sponsors. I'm sure there'll be others announced. But yeah, belt drive. Reese loves, thinking outside the box, both in the way he rides and the way he sets up and builds a bike. I'm really excited by this project, and whoever is on that squad, I think it's going to be one of the teams to watch.
I think it will be really interesting how it pans out. If they can get the bike where they want it. I loved watching that Gamex bike be ridden. One of the juniors was riding it 24 and 23 as well, I think, and it was really cool. And one of the boys on Gamex I've got to know again trackside. So they've got some clever guys in their corner from a bike point of view.
Yeah,
and bringing that program together there must be a trade-off between size of team, riders we need for the points to be here, and then having that same core focus. And I think having someone help Reese put that together will take a little bit of pressure off, because again, sort of reflecting back to the Joe Breeden situation with Intense, you need that support around you to keep that all working, because there's a lot going on, because you are trying to be an athlete. And I actually I sat and watched that video, his sort of release video, because I was interested to hear what he had to say about it. And he implied that he was trying to hand off and delegate lots of stuff so he could stay focused on the riding, and that didn't surprise me. And I think that he's very clued up guy, a Net Performance, and he'll be bringing that together. And I don't know anything about Greg. Like Greg Williamson, one of those guys that with the sort of closing down of Madison might have been sort of left not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
But I have seen that he's re-signed with Martin Whiteley as his sort of agent. Yeah. So whether that means he's more likely to be on the AON thing or not, who knows?
Yeah.
We'll find out. Yeah, it will come out tomorrow.
Greg, I mean, luckily for Greg, I guess, had some good results last season. Like, he's had a few rough years, so probably put himself in a fairly good position.
Yeah, he's one of these riders that has shown an awful lot of speed, and then sometimes you wonder why it wasn't quite there. But I'd like to see him again. He's got a lot more to give. Yeah. And he's a lovely guy as well. So he's one of the guys you want to see there, and being able to feel as though he's got a smile on his face at the end of Sunday, wherever that position ends up. You want him to think, yeah, I've done a good job here.
Definitely. But yeah, fair play, Reese. Good on you for doing something
exciting.
Different.
And such a big change from this big sort of corporate Trek thing to going completely turning left.
Yeah.
And, it was quite a well-known thing that we knew it was coming, like quite early on in the season. So it was quite an exciting, a lot of people were chatting about it and how's it going to work, and is it going to work, and are they going to be there, are they going to get the riders, are they going to get the funding, are they going to get the support? So, if that's the sort of the chitter chatter around the pits, that he's working his socks off to try and pull it together.
And it's going to be another one of those stories that the real fans want to follow. So it's exciting
absolutely.
For sure. All right, Continental Atherton, another team you're close to through Charlie. Yeah. We assume Charlie stays. We've heard rumours of Luke Wayman and Elise MP joining the squad. We've seen pictures of a Gearbox bike, and we've now seen Dan Brown's statement that they will be running gearbox bikes with a Gates belt drive. So yeah, some cool changes there, and it's going to be interesting to see them and also how they stack up from a points/wildcard perspective to get into World Cup, which seems crazy that we're talking about Continental Atherton in that way.
I know. I think they might have had to make the decision when they knew Andy was leaving as to what do we replace Andy? Do we not kind of try and replace that rider? Do we bring on juniors? What do we do? And that must have been quite tricky for them to navigate and decide what they want to do. But especially with this new bike, I saw that. I've seen the bike. I've had a little play on it. It's really nice.
It looks so nice, yeah.
And it's like it just. I was saying to G the other day, it just looks right. It's sort of just you know it's an Atherton. You know it's sort of it's almost like an evolution of that bike. It doesn't feel as though it's a completely bonkers bike.
Yeah.
It just seems to sort of fit. And Charlie's really enjoyed this process. Like I don't know what I can discuss about this, and it's his story to tell, but I think he's quite enjoyed the process of they've got a very quick turnaround, the way those guys can prototype stuff. And I think he's quite enjoyed getting into the adjustment of how does this work? What happens if I try that? Is this going to work? This is a problem. And he's been pulling it apart himself. And I never really looked at Charlie as that sort of rider. And I think that was something that Charlie wasn't great at. He was like, the bike's good enough. But he's almost been forced to go, no, the bike's not good enough. We've got no idea what this bike's like. So from the bike point of view, that would be fascinating. And those guys build a good bike. You know, if you think about it, you've got Charlie racing it, and then you've got the experience of Afi and G. They won't let anything come through that's not going to be brilliant.
Yeah.
But on the same token, when we're discussing the availability of riders and what they're going to do, you may wonder whether we see on the UCI team sheet that G and Rach are being signed back up, you know, like whether they're going to do a lot of races or just one, or, you know, the whole teasing, hey, belt drive, 100K, Rachel Atherton, winningest female ever.
I've had numerous Instagram DMs. Clearly Rachel's racing. Rachel must be coming back.
Yeah.
Like she'd easily get that. And you're like,
and if I want to stir the pot anymore, they were all out at Red Bull last week, and Rachel was there training with them out there. You know, I don't know. I think it'll be hard to, like, Rachel's like one of these racehorses, and you're trying to get her into the starting blocks, and she's sometimes reluctant to get in there. And you get her in the starting blocks, and then poof, she's gone. Hey, we can't catch Rachel. So if they can get her in the starting blocks, I think she might be very dangerous.
It would be a great story, and you could see why if you were Warner Brothers and G and Rach were on the team list, you'd give a wild card.
Of course you would.
You'd give. They'd have a good chance of getting one.
But then, how many times have we said the word wild card today?
Someone's going to lose out.
Someone's going to lose out. But then why should they? I don't really know. To me, losing out means you didn't qualify. If you're not top 30, if you're not top 15, you don't make the cut, you don't make it to race day. No problem. We know that game. We know that game. I don't think we want. Funnily enough, I saw Gypsy Tales had a podcast just the other day, and they were talking, you know, Jason from Gypsy Tales was talking about, he was like, get the privateers out of Supercross. We don't need guys who are going 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds slower per lap than the leader. Because after 4 or 5 laps, we've just got, it's like people grenading left, right and center, and it's affecting the racing. I completely get that, but we're not in that spot. Like what we're doing in downhill is those privateers are having that opportunity prior to the night show. You know, we're basically saying, well, you can give it a good go, because it's like, in this example, outdoor motocross. If you can qualify in the top 40 at an outdoor national, it doesn't matter if you're out of a sprinter van or a big semi, you can race the big boys. And I do want us to see, you know, I always hark back to Coulange and Andy Kolb as the examples of these slow burners who've kind of come through, and then you see this trajectory of their career. It didn't start high. It's got, over a period of time, it's gone up that curve. And I just pray that we can keep that, you know, ethos there while still having a good product at the end of it. You don't want to watch on Ski Sunday 1 million skiers coming down the same ski piste.
Sure.
I get it. I completely get it. So we've got to find that balance.
It's the balance, definitely. And so there's a few teams that don't know much about at this state, and also don't know how they're going to fit from like either a wild card or a points perspective, and probably are in an interesting spot for the teams, I guess. So Pivot, Bernard's team, don't really know much about what that squad's going to look like. I think Bernard was open about being out in Indonesia or somewhere like that looking for some points basically at the back end of last year. Cube with Jess Blewett, don't really know quite what that squad looks like and where that'll stack up. And then Yeti Factory, so I think they retained Tyler Waite. Richie Rude is obviously there, incredibly talented rider, which maybe we'll see more downhill focus from Richie, we don't know. Mick Hanna, Ryan Gilchrist, and then rumoured Camille Belanche, which would be a really cool thing to see. But again, you know, Camille's season I don't think comes with a huge amount of points because she had some challenges throughout the year. So yeah, all those three teams are all good brands, good teams, good history. We don't really know what will happen there.
I know. And that's where Bernard brings so much to the racing in terms of his sort of promotion of it, his critical eye towards it, and you know, his flair on the bike, and that is only good. I think you want someone like that who can he kind of like, he talks the talk but he does walk the walk, and he's sort of that good balance of those things. And I think in a way, it's almost good to have someone who's like, no, that's not right. I don't agree with that. You don't want everyone just to toe the line because they need to toe the line, but especially when they can ride a bike like he does.
Yeah.
But he's in this position where, unfortunately, I don't know whether he's going to have, maybe again, I don't want to speak out of turn because I have absolutely no idea. But if you've got someone who's being critical of the system an awful lot, and then they're actually beholden to the system, maybe they're like, hey man, this is how you have to play. And I don't know whether that's going to be as easy for him. Maybe he's had a pretty tough time to work out what's going to happen. Yeah. And again, I don't know the situation with the Jewett brothers, but if the Jewett brothers were there, then, you know, or he thought they were going to be there, or he was planning on that, and then it changed, then that must be a big change for him. So he's probably working pretty hard to work out how it all works.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see that announcement as to where Pivot Factory Racing heads.
Yeah, where that goes. And then with Yeti, like, I think we should be like embracing a company wanting to come back in, because again, it was something that was spoken about, was they were coming back to downhill.
Yeah.
But I think they're coming back to downhill as they turn their back on enduro, and that's another concern for me, is to, when you think of these teams that have turned their back, and we've mentioned a couple of riders that were enduro riders that, you know, YT have brought into downhill, Orbea have brought into downhill, and now Yeti are maybe bringing full-time downhill. Where does that leave those companies with a presence in enduro?
Yeah.
And if they're not having a presence in enduro, it's because they don't see the benefit, which to me is fascinating, because you would think that the easiest thing to do in terms of selling bikes is to say, hey, the bike that you are going to want to ride day in, day out has beaten everyone else on that bike. It might be an easier sell than the idea of like you're buying into the brand itself as opposed to the specific bike, because we don't sell enough downhill bikes to necessarily support downhill.
For sure.
But you would think in enduro you could get to the point where you sell enough enduro bikes to support enduro, in my naive view on this.
It's fair.
So Yeti will be exciting. Yeti will be really exciting, and see how Richie does, because he's sort of got to a good level in downhill, switched to enduro, and then like blew everyone's socks off in enduro, and like, wow, this guy's incredible. So it'll be good to see what happens there.
I'm sure we'll know in the not too distant future. I think 3 weeks to wait until the official announcement, or at least when the teams get told. I don't know if that's when the public get told. We'll find out. I'm sure we've missed riders. We can't talk about everyone. One rider who we should talk about is Aaron Gwynn. 12th place at Mont St. Anne. Still incredibly fast on track, even when he's, you know, had a shocker of a year and loads of injury and time off. Also doing double duty in commentary, which we know now he's very, very good at and very naturally talented at. I'd love to have him in the commentary booth, but I still want to see him on the track.
Absolutely.
Do you think? Well, how does that happen? Because the team clearly doesn't have enough points. There's been no announcements. He's tied in now with Crestline bikes. Like, I don't know what Aaron Gwynn on the start line looks like.
No, I don't know what avenue you would take. I think because of the route Aaron's gone down with sorting his own program, and then he sort of bounced around a few companies within that program as well over the years. It's not like he's got this solid, like this foundation that's grown. It's not like an Atherton thing that's kind of grown and like, right, this is ours to hang our hat on. I still feel as though companies sort of come into that program and then go out of that program. It's going to be hard for him, because he'd have to invest, like this year, I think Seth was on that program, and I don't know if Seth's going to stay on that program, for example. It'd be interesting to see where Seth sort of ends up, because he's another one of these riders with loads of potential, and again was doing really well in enduro, sort of double duty on enduro.
Yeah.
But where did they fall? But with Aaron, to be injured and be out and be in the commentary booth and then come 12th, you're like, we need to see those 12 places, and it shows that there's definitely life in the old dog.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
no doubt about that. I think we've covered the vast majority. Apologies to anyone we missed or any teams we've missed out, and apologies for any inaccuracies. I've done the best that I can in the research with given what's out there. A few other things that I wanted to kind of touch on before we wrap up. I've had a lot of messages from people complaining about how long team launches are taking. Fair play to Norco, you did get it all out pretty quickly in a one-er really, but a lot of brands seem to be dragging us out and
teasing.
What do you think to that approach?
I think, well, you'll seen, because I was very supportive of how we were going to do it at Norco. Let's show people once it's all sorted and we can get everyone together. Because bear in mind, there's a logistical way around this. How do you want to actually do it?
Yeah.
How do you want to showcase what you've done? And we had a clear plan on how we wanted to do that, and then we could make it link with the training camp, and there we go. But I don't know whether we need. I don't know how much people care about weeks on end of shadow photos and who's going to be on this. Like maybe an early teaser. Like what I think to me, this harks back to Danny. Danny sent me this photo on WhatsApp, and he was on his new bike, and he was at Hamsterley, and he blacked everything out, and he said, what do you reckon? Can I post this? And I was like, I'm not sure. Let me just have a word with Greg. And then Greg was like, yeah, let him post it. And then like I get sent this screenshot like hours later, and Danny's just crying with laughter because some clever guy on Vital has just like stripped it all back and seen the cast handlebars. But I was like, you know what? And Greg, we didn't mind. We were like, you know what? Perfect.
Yeah, it's a great tease.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's the tease.
Yeah.
But it's kind of organic.
Yeah.
I think if you were to go on and you were to try and stage that, and we were to have the marketing department say, hey, Danny, can you just go and do this for me? It loses the sort of enjoyment, because I think it is enjoyable for people to feel as though they've peeked behind the curtain to see something they shouldn't have seen.
Yeah.
And that's to me what the tease is.
Yeah.
The tease isn't that the official team page has put out something and saying, hey, what's going on? I think that I love these sort of spy shots, from whether it was in Motorcycle News and you were seeing some guy riding this bike and, look at this, or on the motocross forums where someone was on a different color bike and they shouldn't have been on it because they're still in contract. That's exciting for people to see. But then we should get to a point where we all know. And the problem is that I still don't know whether we are this elite team. And because of that, we've had to earmark X amount of budget towards paying for the privilege of doing this.
Yeah.
And we hope that it's all working.
Yeah.
But then we've got a position where I'm trying to fly the family out for one of the races, and I still don't know when race day is. So I'm trying to explain to my brother-in-law that I can't book his flights for him because I don't know when he's flying home. And he's like, I don't understand. This is not like a World Cup series. And I'm trying to defend it. Like I'm trying my very best to defend it. But he doesn't know. Like I don't know when race day is on one of the events, and we don't even know the venue for another one of the events. And come on, let's start at the ground floor.
Yeah. Hopefully things will improve, right?
There'll be reasons, but there'll be plenty of reasons why this is the case.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure no one wants to not have the date set.
No.
But
But it does come a point where, come on.
It doesn't help.
Yeah.
It doesn't fair. A couple of themes. Gearboxes is a clear theme. Gates belt, like belt drive, gearbox bikes, 100k to win. Think someone will take it this year?
They could well do. Absolutely. I do think that it's quite an exciting thing that's been around for a while. It's kind of hasn't been picked up on. And one of the things, again, my opinion, no real fact behind it, but if you have Shimano, SRAM, TRP, all like massively in there early doors with sponsorship, and they've covered all the big teams, and they don't have a gearbox, there isn't going to be no development of a gearbox.
Yeah.
But when those big companies don't have that same hold, or there's more flexibility for some teams to try different things, all of a sudden they're like, well, you know what, if I'm buying my parts, I can buy this thing, and then it opens up the opportunity to develop. And I think that's where it started. There were some companies like Gamex, for example, who were like, well, why not? We're not going to have this, you know, big income from one of these big sponsors. Let's try this. And then it's got to a point where maybe this year's the tipping point. And what excites me is what happens next, because are we going to find that Gates is bought by SRAM, or one of the opinion is sold to Shimano? I have no idea, but it would be quite, I think we're getting to that point where things could be quite interesting with the development of this technology. And it sort of takes me back. I think the last time we saw a shift like this was when the wheel size changed from 26 inch. It felt as though there was a little bit of like concern. Hey, if we're turning up to this race and we don't have this, what's going to happen? And I don't think we're not concerned about that. We've got some really exciting things on the Norco that's in development at the moment that is really going to improve the performance of that bike, and that's super cool. And it's in a different direction. So we've you know, it's not like we're not thinking about these things. We're all thinking about it. And I think that the belt drive, the big concern for that is it's surely got to be enclosed to some level. You know, you saw Taylor's bike, Blenky's bike at Ludenville were just throwing belts because the mud got in them. And that's just fact. The belt was just getting chucked off. So there's got to be what happens when it gets muddy. You know, are these bikes getting really shitty and muddy, and are they still working? I don't know.
If Reese is getting away with the Scottish winter, then there must be some solutions on the horizon. But we'll see. That's good. It's developing the technology, which is what it's all about.
Absolutely. Exactly.
And you know, you talk about the work with Norco, and you know, everyone's puzzling and thinking and looking for improvements. And it feels like that trend for having like engineers from the bike brand, like dedicated race engineers in the pits, is just going to continue to grow, right? Everyone's really digging, and we've seen the success of Arthur Quet Commencal and the way that's worked. And I think, you know, you guys have been doing it even with Kirk being on the bike as well.
Exactly. It, to me, it's not necessarily the engineers in the pits, it's the link with the people making the bike. It's having that link. You don't want the tail wagging the dog, and you're there to race, but you want this we've got a fantastic engineering support crew that are very much integrated into this. They're the ones working on the bike, designing the bike, telling us when the bike's going to be available, telling us what is possible, what's not possible. And when you've got that, I think that's really exciting, because a rider can go, you know what, I really like this direction. Come on, let's go with it. And then the engineer's like, brilliant, let's run with this idea. But if you're very disparate, you know, like separated from the guys building the bikes, and they send you a bike and you ride it, that's when you're sort of tinkering around in the dark going, well, is this going to work? Am I going to try that? And I'd say that the mechanics levels are upping again. We're not really at this point where it's bike shop mechanics coming into a World Cup. A lot of these guys have got engineering degrees.
I was going to say they're becoming more like engineers than mechanics.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, they're very, very. There was a period where I think a mechanic felt as though he was changing tires. You know, he was a glorified tire changer, and then the suspension was going to Fox, and he was like, well, I'm cleaning the bike and changing the tires. But we're really not there now. There's a lot of stuff that they're inputting and they're suggesting.
That's cool.
It's really good. It's maximizing what's there.
Nice. We've talked a lot about this jeopardy of, you know, 15 teams, 5 wildcards, all of this stuff. We'll see how that all pans out. But ultimately, the aim of this is restricting the numbers at a World Cup. Do you think that's a positive, and that's going to pan out well for the performance of the event? Like, it feels like, you know, so many riders have said we do need less riders at a World Cup.
Yeah, it's the balance, but basically it's sort of volume. If you think about it's number of runs times number of people. So what are you going to do? Are you going to restrict the number of runs, or are you going to restrict the number of people, or are you going to restrict a bit of both? Because the track does go through this development, and you'll go to a track and you'll look at it and you'll be like, that's going to be dead by race day. It's just going to be mullered. And part of that is down to when things get built. Like Ludenville, they built this berm and it was just being packed in when we arrived for track walk.
So it's
like,
come on,
it's just going to be ruined. But other parts of the track are nice when they develop and they go through a sweet spot. So I think everyone wants the riders to be on a track at the right, like racing at the right stage. I don't know whether the positive is obviously in the track, that I still think there's going to be quite a lot of jerseyed riders there. So each federation has X number of jerseys they can send.
Yeah.
And I think you'll find that if you add up the number of federations available to send X number of jerseys to a race, we might still have quite a potentially large number of people there.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
but that was
the
one
more
of,
I think about it, the more it feels like there's still going to be a decent
still
amount of people.
Still a decent amount of people.
Yeah.
And if the racing gets cut down too much, what you find is there's very little to actually, like sometimes on track, there'll be so few people, like race day morning when there's 10 women for an hour, there's very little happens. And it's sort of like, it takes a bit of the buzz away. The media aren't that bothered about covering it because they get one chance to get one shot and they're like, oh, maybe we don't want to do that. Yeah. And in a way, I think we want to flip that on its head. We want people to be excited to be on the hill covering what's going on.
Yeah, true.
So we can tell that story. I think that there is a story to tell outside of the race runs.
Yeah.
And I think the media needs to tell that story of what's going on. And just like the Continental series, talking about, we need to be there. I find it very sad when you go on to Pink Bike and there's a New Zealand national and you see a result sheet, bang.
Nothing. Yeah.
Nothing going on. And you look through it, hey, well, what's this rider in their new kit? Because there might be a new rider in their new kit on their new bike for the first time at this race. Well, nothing.
Yeah.
The proof of the pudding's this weekend because there's the Continental race, Coronet Peak, New Zealand.
Okay.
Right. What are we going to see? Is there going to be an output from it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's really important because that's, our brand's going to invest in the Continental series.
Exactly.
If there's no exposure, there's no investment, right? So
exactly.
It's going to be really interesting to see. Yeah,
there'll be some fast riders there. Like I think Ronan will be racing that race, for example.
Yeah.
So surely you want to cover that. Surely you want to see who else is going to be there. Surely you want to see all of these things shaking out, and I want to be able to open the laptop and go, well, what's happened? And if I want to do that, I think there's a lot of my friends are way more clued up on. They know so much more than me. Have you seen this on Vital? No, I haven't. Have you seen this? No, I haven't.
It's hard to keep up. We're 86 pages deep into the
really?
Team Rumours forum.
Yeah, I get sent screenshots so one of the things that made me laugh was I got so many messages. Alan, you've got an unlimited budget on Norco. Have you heard? And I was like, we have not got an unlimited budget on Norco. And it was really funny because that was one of the memes or posts or something that someone had put out there that it was just unlimited and we could just do what we want. And I was like, man, I've missed the memo. Why didn't someone tell me that?
That's the fun of the forum,
But
right?
that's the fun of the forum.
Yeah.
And that's, to be honest, that's why I don't go on there because I with all due respect to it, I probably am not going to learn too much.
No, that's fair.
And I'm probably going to think I'm out of a job tomorrow
But for those of us that aren't on the inside, it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it.
For sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah. It's great.
I'm sure.
One more thing, LCQ, a totally different format, getting rid of semis, bringing in this last chance qualifier thing, which I think structurally is a great thing. Like thoughts on it from a race weekend point of view, and also impact on riders, in your capacity as like a physical coach. Does it change things for riders much?
I think it's a real positive. I'm really happy that they've moved in this direction. There were a few people that were banging on about it. I think we've banged on about it. I know Needles was a big proponent of it. And a lot of other people felt as though it was the right way to go. The idea of having a rider put in an absolutely blazing run and then like Matt Walker would be a great example at Mont Saint Anne. He won that qualifier, crashed in his semi, doesn't make the final. This is ridiculous. The guy smoked everyone in his quali. Has he not done enough?
Yeah.
And on this new format, the quali would be you'd be in, qualifying Q1, and then instead of going to the semi, Matt Walker would put his feet up, have a jacuzzi, and he'd be resting. And I know I'm being flippant, but the reality is I don't think they need that other run. I don't think there'd be anyone going, I just want one more run on that track. I think they'd feel as though, you know what, I'll save my legs.
Yeah, hell yeah.
I've done that effort. Mentally, it's really hard to gear back up.
Yeah. Then
if there's any red flags, like again, if you have a red flag and you're like scrambling, or it might be that you go, no, it's fine. I'll go to the LCQ, that's fine.
Yeah.
It might give you a bit more room because that's one of the things, like the red flags proved really problematic because they almost didn't have room and didn't know where to put them. There was no clear, this is what happens.
Yeah.
And then when you've got someone who's put in a really good run, they've then got to go back up and back it up. And I don't really, to me, that's, downhill isn't that. Downhill's one and done, bang. So the idea is to get the fastest guys to the final. And if you've got a problem with your bike, you get another go at it.
Yeah.
If you're not quite there and you're on the cusp of getting in that top 30, brilliant. We'll give you 2 bites of the cherry. And that to me is a really good thing.
Yeah, I agree. Right, before we wrap up, how's Milway Performance Products? Are you still doing stuff on that?
Yeah.
You're a busy man.
I'm a busy man. We've so I've got the weights benches that you have one,
lovely bit of kit,
which are brilliant, and they're sort of a steady product. It's not something that I don't market it too much. It's one of those that it's low volume, high quality. But what's been nice is to sell to a gym, and then the gym phones you up, hey, I'd like another one of them, and you're like, hey, this is brilliant. They're getting abused, but they're getting used. I'm working on 2 different designs of some different products at the moment. One of my weightlifting friends who's at a very high level was after something, and I think I can make it better than anyone else, so we're going back and forth on designs on that.
Nice.
I've got an adjustable bench that's in the sort of works at the moment.
Interesting.
We had an initial design that was incredible, but incredibly expensive. I was like, we need to work on that. So, but I there's things I want to do. And then also with the slant boards are something that they're sort of very easy to make poorly. And I've tried to make them at a very high quality, so they're really robust. And we use them in the pits all the time, honestly. And Red Bull have got one in their pit at the World Cups because it helps you stretch off at the ankles. It helps you gain mobility and range. And it's just a useful piece of kit. And so you can chuck it in your van or in your kit bag. But again, to have something that you can do that, and it just, previously they're made of cheap bits of wood and they just disintegrate. So I've really enjoyed that. It's one of those things that for me is a long-term plan. When I start to get a little bit older and I know what I'd like it to get to. But it's very much like I want riders to be winning races, and that's sort of on the side at the moment. So,
but when you step back a bit, maybe from racing, then that gets more focus. More makes focus. Sense.
But I love the process. It makes me scratch my head, and people ask me, like, I've got some clever people who are a high level of elite sport in different sports, and they'll quiz me on this and they'll critique that. And one of the guys, this lad called Ollie, who is in the Olympic final for swimming, he's a swimmer, he trains at the University of Birmingham. It's always so rewarding because he always uses my bench, he always wheels it out, and I'm like, good lad. Yeah,
that's pretty nice.
So that to me is the reward. It's not selling hundreds of units, but if people are after a really high quality bench, then they know where to come. I'm really proud of it.
Nice one. Well, we've got a hell of a race season ahead of us. We've got that Jeopardy moment to get through in 3 weeks' time when we find out which team's going to be there and which aren't. But once we get beyond that, I think there's a huge amount to be excited about. Some wicked new teams, some great changes, some moves, new format to see how that shakes down, some new venues. Like, it's going to be a wild season, and as ever, I'm sure the racing will deliver. One last question: other than Norco, which team are you most excited to watch this year?
Well, that's a good question. I think I'm going to hedge my bets a little bit, but I'm going to say I'm really interested to see how the gearboxes shake out. Is it the gearbox that makes a difference? Is it the effect on the suspension that makes the bikes better? Or at the end of the day, is it, less chance of having a rear mech smashed off? And to me, that will be interesting to see if it brings a performance benefit or whether we all shake out. But I like seeing these teams that are trying something slightly different, depending on however they're doing that. And I feel us at Norco are doing things a little bit different. We're not trying to go down this very straight-laced corporate thing, but we've got a very clear performance aim. And with the group we've got, that's going to be really exciting. But then from the flip side, there's different ways, more one way to skin a cat. So these smaller teams that may be more agile with what they're doing, I love Nico's project. I think that's really cool. So it'd be good to see how he gets on. And the gearboxes, it'd be fascinating to see how that Atherton bike stacks up. So I'm very lucky to have been in the sport quite a long time now, and I'm as excited as ever, to get back and what's going to happen. So it's going to be 2025 is going to be brilliant.
Definitely. Nice one, mate. Let's hope everyone gets a healthy rest of the off season. Have a good trip to New Zealand for your next team camp. And we'll see you at the first race.
Thank you, mate. Been a pleasure.